Record.
Yeah, and then as people trickle in, like I'll publish my slides at the end of it. I'll send out a link or I'll post a link. I
Sure.
actually don't have
Yeah.
them live yet, but I will do that at the end of this conversation here.
Yeah, you can send them to me, Kyle, and I can
Sure. Okay,
e
perfect. We'll do
email them
that.
out. Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Okay, so welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Lisa Jordan. I am the Executive Director of the Executives Association of Charlotte in beautiful Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm also the Managing Director of the IEA. Great to see lots of familiar faces on this webinar today. As you know, we do these every single month. They're free for you to attend and also free for you to host. So if you have a great topic, something that would be relevant to business owners across the US and Canada, I will pop my information into the chat. Please reach out to me. Or if someone in your association you think might be a great fit for an upcoming webinar, feel free to connect us, as we would love to talk to them about hosting a future webinar. I would like to go ahead and introduce our speaker today, Kyle Huberman, who is the CEO of Pixel, a digital agency based in Edmonton, Alberta. As you guessed, Kyle's a member of the Edmonton Executives Association since 2019. Oh, all right. Sorry about that. I had to allow someone's recording. He leads a seasoned team that designs, builds, and maintains the digital platforms that businesses rely on every day. Pixel specializes in open source web technologies, primarily WordPress and custom API integrations to deliver effective, reliable, and scalable solutions. Their work spans from high-growth startups to mid-market companies, associations, and enterprise-scale organizations. I'm excited to hear what Kyle has to share with us
Awesome.
today. So with that, Kyle, take it away.
Thanks. Thanks, Lisa. I'm not usually one to have like imposter syndrome. I'm relatively confident, but whenever anybody introduces me and like reads off a bio about like who I am and my accolades, I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. Hi. And I sort of like shy away. So welcome. Thank you for joining. Today we're going to talk about in-house versus outsourced technology and a couple tangential conversations that can stem from that. I've been doing this now at Pixel for, I don't know, 15 plus years. And while one would think that the default position of a business owner would be, oh, bring us business, give us business, that as you develop a business, you realize not everybody is the right fit for a client, not everybody is the right partner for a project. And so having and educating businesses on when they should be developing something in-house versus when they should be outsourcing their tech or doing a couple other options, as I'll discuss, is a really important thing to educate individuals on, so that they can make the right and best decisions for their company. So hopefully by the end of this conversation today, that my goal is to provide you guys with a what I'll call reusable decision framework. So a series of questions that you can ask yourself when you're entering into a scenario or a question surrounding internal technologies or surrounding infrastructure and the procurement around them. And I'm going to break down the decision-making process today into 4 buckets, I guess, as to when you should build, when you should buy. Typically, buying is in the form of what in our industry we'll call a SaaS, software as a service. So in that case, you can think of that as something like a Dropbox or an Outlook, Netflix. These are all applications that back in the day you might buy on a CD and install on your computer and then you own. But with the way markets are going and economies and just the way that they build out their infrastructure, they now sell it to you as an ongoing subscription. So this is how you typically would procure technology. You could outsource the development of it. So rather than building it in-house, you can outsource it, or you could do nothing. These are the 4 buckets we'll talk about. And then you obviously need to understand why you're choosing that direction. So please, please, please stop me at any time during this presentation to ask a question either via your microphone, just like literally butt in, or drop your message in chat. Both Lisa and I are looking at chat. I'm looking at it right now. I would much prefer that you ask the question during the relevant time in the slide deck and when it's a top of mind to you and other individuals, rather than wait to the very end and then we're either pressed for time or you've forgotten the question or we're cycling back 17 slides to go to that point. So please, please, please stop me. I would prefer that. So, who is Pixel? And I guess then why bother listening to me? So, as Lisa said, we're located in Western Canada. We work with organizations large and small, public and private, to develop digital experiences and build custom solutions. We have had the opportunity to work with some of the largest organizations in Canada, the province of Alberta, the province of Ontario, the province of BC. We've worked with some of the largest clients on the TSX and the New York Stock Exchange, DocuSign, Xero. We've worked with a lot of venture startups here in Canada, Jobber being one of them. But we also do a lot of work with very small companies, your local coffee shop, your local community soccer league, your dentist or esthetician. These are all clients that we've had the opportunity to engage with. And we've done one of three things, or sometimes all three things for them. We've built platforms and services for them. We've integrated those services into their existing technology stack. And then we've maintained those services after they've been developed. So initially, I was going to give you guys this fictitious scenario in which I wanted you to think about that you were some sort of small business in Northern Canada, and we were going to use that as a case study for the purposes of this conversation. But then I realized that you all every day interact with business technology procurement decisions that I didn't need to give you another one to put on your busy plate for you to think about another problem that you may have. So instead, what I would simply ask is just think about the last time that you signed up for an online service or that you bought a new piece of software that came with a piece of hardware on the side. So whether that being a new point of sale system or a piece of industrial equipment, or a lot of people are buying now these AI microphones that they can put on the middle of a boardroom table that will then transcribe the meeting. So similar how we have Otter on Zoom, what happens if a piece of technology takes place or a meeting takes place in the physical? How do you get it into the digital? These are all technology procurement decisions that we interact with on a daily basis, or even something as simple as copying and pasting numbers from a spreadsheet and then moving those numbers to Excel or to Gmail. Now, you would say to yourself, well, I don't need a new piece of software to copy and paste information. And you'd be right. You don't. And that's why you've ultimately decided through a very quick decision-making process in your head that you've ultimately decided to do nothing, right? You don't need to go buy a piece of software to help you copy and paste something more effectively because you have a good routine around that. But if you're copying and pasting the same time 15 times an hour because you're moving information from one invoice into your accounting management software, or you're moving numbers from a PowerPoint presentation into a document that you need to send out to your shareholders or stakeholders. Now, all of a sudden, instead of it just being a quick copy paste, it's now something that is redundant and something that you are constantly going to have to do. And you start to think about, how do I optimize that process? How do I make that process more efficient? How do I make that process more streamlined? And now all of a sudden, what you really didn't think of as a technology procurement problem ends up being, oh, wait a second, maybe there is a way that I could be doing this more effectively, more efficiently. Maybe I do need to make a decision, right? And so those decisions can be around, as I said, copying and pasting. That's just like the most pedantic version of this. But it could be something as big as, we need a new ERP, we need a new CRM, we need a new website, we need a new e-commerce system. These are all technology purchasing questions, and they can all be described and discussed in this framework. Whether you build it in-house, whether you buy it, whether you outsource it, and when you outsource it, that typically means you're building it custom versus outsourcing and just simply buying something that is already built, or you could simply do nothing. These are the four options that you ultimately have. So let's dive into this decision-making framework. So the first option is building it in-house, right? When do you want to decide, you know what? I have a new website and I'm going to build it ourselves. We need a new ERP system and we're going to build it ourselves. The first and primary reason to do this is when the technology is the business, right? If you are a business that is primarily online, if you are a business where the core functionality and application of your business is technology, then that is something that you should internally look to own. That is something that you're going to need rapid iteration on, and you're going to need deep operational context around what that platform is. Nobody cares more about your business and your product than yourself. I know you'll go into meetings, and we go into meetings all the time where we say, well, we're a stakeholder. We want to retain your business. We want to build relationships with you. And we discuss how much we want to be a part of the problem-solving process for these organizations. And yet still, we will never care as much as you will care about your own product. And so if this platform is something that your business not only relies on, but is the business itself, we will never be able to match the external day-to-day urgency that you will have as part of this platform. So if you are a business that is purely an e-commerce based business, this is the kind of technology that I would be looking to bring in-house and not outsource. Because without this online platform, you ostensibly don't have a business, right? If your platform is, let's say, a CRM and you sell windshields, well, that's secondary to your business. It's a core part of your business and you rely on it to operate, but it's not the business itself. If you are going to do something in-house and build a piece of technology in-house, you need to understand the costs around that, right? In order to make the best, well, I guess we'll call ROI decision. So the salary of a developer isn't the 60K that you see, and this is something that is standard across all salaries, right? You have to take into consideration that there's a fully burdened cost. There's the overhead, there's the training, there's the ramp time, there's the time that you're going to lose to onboard or your other staff are going to lose to onboard them. There's the opportunity cost of not making a different decision. And these are all real and these are all ongoing costs. If you purchase something, it's a one-time fee, ideally, right? And if you outsource to an agency, it's ideally a one-time thing with a little bit of maintenance. But if you hire somebody, this is going on into perpetuity, right? Which is why I go back and say, if the technology is your business, then it is something that you want into perpetuity. You want to own that. And then there's a lot of hidden costs in hiring somebody in-house. There's the turnover risk that you're going to have to replace them. There's the on-call burden in which if your application goes down, you need to bring them in when maybe they're on vacation or it's not on business hours, as opposed to if you contract it out to somebody or you purchase something, then you have an external support team that you can rely on. There's the maintenance tax. So just because the application is built, this individual that you've internally hired to support the development of this application is going to need to invest their time to maintain this application, as opposed to if you just bought it software as a service style, you never have to pay Xero or QuickBooks or FreshBooks to update their platform to give you the latest tax 2025, 2026 tax code, right? That's just something that they are going to do as part of your subscription. There is no maintenance tax. But if you hire in-house and you own the application, there is a maintenance tax that you're going to need to take into consideration. So what don't or what shouldn't you do if you bring something in-house? So don't make a single junior developer or a single student like your chief technologist. You can't do that. And the reason that you can't do that is because you yourself as the business owner have no ability to evaluate the code or the quality or the security of the platform. Yes, you can evaluate the visuals, you can evaluate the front end, what you see, how it feels when you click on it, but you can't look at the code from a holistic perspective and say, oh, we're punching credit card information into this platform 17 times a day. Is this built correctly? And if you have a junior or a student to do this, yes, it's cheap. Yes, it's easy. Yes, maybe it's the son of the business owner because they're on TikTok all day and they know how to do some of these things or they think they know. Like, that's the easy solution, but it's not the right solution. And you're going to get issues where you have these like misfit expectations, right? Where you have this like SEO social person, but that person can't be your ERP, your DevOps lead, right? You really need to invest the money in a what we typically define as a self-managing generalist, right? Somebody who can look at a platform holistically, that understands the front and the back end of it, the security implications, the architectural decisions, who can communicate to you as a business owner, but also communicate to the end users, whether they be your customers or your staff, depending on what the platform ends up being, as well as somebody who can say no. We as business owners, and I see this all the time, is once the ball starts rolling down a hill, once they start getting the idea that, oh, we could build something and it can do this, and what about that? Oh, that's a really great idea. Why don't we add this? That shouldn't be too difficult, right? Right? And the ball gets rolling, rolling, and faster and faster. And if you have somebody that doesn't have, I don't want to say doesn't have a backbone, but doesn't have the experience to stand up and say, this is actually a bad idea, or this is too much scope, or we need to slow down, or we need to do some discovery first, or we really need to figure out how these integrations are going to take place, then they're just going to keep saying yes and yes and yes, and you're going to run into issues. And so you need to have somebody that this isn't their first rodeo, and that they are able and have the ability to say no when all of these stakeholders come into a meeting and get really excited about all the things that they could possibly do. So we keep hearing, I hear it constantly around these in-house conversations, and they're coming up more and more, where business owners are now looking at ChatGPT or Anthropic or Llama or whatever these AI platforms end up being, whether they being the core LLMs or they end up being the wrappers around the LLMs. And they're saying, well, we don't need to hire a developer. I can just do this myself. I can code this out, right? This is no problem. I see this on LinkedIn all the time. And yes, you can do it, but just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. In our opinion, AI really helps you hire the second developer. It doesn't help you avoid the first developer. At least we don't think it should. If you are already a technically competent individual, right, I think it can escalate you to incredible degrees. But it still doesn't take that junior person and elevate them to anybody that should be making any meaningful decisions. Because ultimately, the downfalls and the inexperience of those junior developers are still going to be inexperience within that junior developer. The AI might make them a better coder, but it's not going to help them be a better decision maker. It's not going to help them better understand when the AI makes a mistake, right? Or when the AI says something that isn't true, right? When it confabulates, when it spits out mediocre code, when it doesn't do exactly as you've said, or sometimes it does exactly what you said, and what you've said is actually the wrong thing. But as a junior, you don't have that experience, right? And so the reality of AI is that it helps scale, but you need to already be moving forward. You need to have 3, 5 years of experience. You need to have 2 members of your existing team, and AI helps you now scale so that you don't need to hire the third. Those are great use cases of AI. AI for me is amazing, right? I haven't coded in 10 years, right? I used to build whatever tables in HTML with the most ridiculous of ways. And then I started to run a business and I hadn't coded in a while, right? But now with AI, my foundational principles are all there. And now it lets me leverage and learn all of these new technologies and languages, and that's great. And I can still ask the hard questions of the model. I can still understand, hopefully understand, when it's making a mistake. And even I am not the most competent. So a human in the loop is what we call as absolutely, absolutely non-negotiable. And I'll give you a really good example of this. So I'm building this login screen. This looks like your like regular login screen that you'd see on any individual e-commerce platform or web platform. I build it out, no problem. And then the client comes to me and says, this doesn't work on Firefox. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go figure out why it doesn't work on Firefox. And so I go to my little chat GPT, whatever, and I say, why doesn't this work on Firefox? Make this work on Firefox. And it does its little spinny, I'm thinking about the problem, I'm thinking about what to do, going through various solutions. And it says, oh, you forgot to do this. Would you like me to implement this for you in the code? So great. Yeah, please do it for me. The reason why you said it doesn't work makes sense. Does its little spinny thing, spits out a bunch of code for me. Okay, great. I'm later looking through this code, day after, 2 days after, and I realize not only did it make this form more compatible with Firefox, what it interpreted me saying is not only make this form more compatible with Firefox, but make this form compatible with Internet Explorer 10 and Internet Explorer 9 and Internet Explorer 6 and all of these old browsers that nobody uses anymore. Make this form compatible with all of them. And somebody not necessarily technically versed would say, well, that's great. It has made this form more compatible with all of these old technology platforms. Wonderful. But the problem is, by doing that, it has made the form infinitely less secure. There is a reason that we don't use these old internet browsers anymore. We were just talking before this call about people upgrading from Windows 10 to Windows 11. There's a reason that Microsoft is wanting people to move on to new platforms. It's because technologies change, security changes, things need to move forward. And all this LLM did is not only did it fix my problem, it then created a dozen more problems for me to have to solve in the future, right? And if you're not well versed enough to dive into this, when these AI platforms think they're being helpful, the reality of the situation is sometimes they can be far less than helpful in some of these problems. So when should you use it? I think AI is really strong for prototyping. I think AI is really strong for what we'd call developing user stories. So pretend you are a user going through my website. What kinds of things would you expect to be able to do? And the AI will help you spit out a bunch of what we would call user stories. I need to be able to change my password. I need to be able to log into this screen. I need to be able to see my past transactions. On my transactions, I probably need to see the invoice number. I need to see how I paid, right? AI can ask you the questions and then you can start developing these user stories around them. AI is really bad for mission critical infrastructure like payments, like login screens. I would not trust them to help me develop these things. So I say, treat AI like a high-speed junior developer, right? It's great. It has great leverage, right? But it needs oversight and it will sometimes wander and do things that you don't understand. And if you're okay with that, you understand what you're getting when you do that, that's wonderful. But if you don't, you're going to run into issues. So that was building it in-house. Let's talk about outsourcing. So when does outsourcing make sense? When should I go hire an agency to build my platform, build my website, build my service for me? When you outsource to us, to Pixel, yes, you're hiring our expertise to build you a platform, but what you're really hiring from us is what we call pattern recognition. You're hiring us to say, we've done that before. We've seen this problem before. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about for this e-commerce site. We just built that. I know what you're talking about for this e-commerce project. We got this. We've done this literally hundreds of times. There is pattern in that, and that is a very valuable asset to a business where the alternative is hiring somebody in-house that may have only done it once or twice. We've done it dozens of times. And so you're buying best practices, you're buying documentation, you're buying continuity, You're not just simply buying our hours as hours. There's a lot that we bring to those hours that it oversteps simply what you would get if you brought somebody in-house for those hours. The other thing that you get is this idea of risk transfer. And this is something that took me a very long time to understand, even as a business owner, is I was talking with one of my friends. He's a lawyer for a very large Toronto law firm. And he was telling me how much work they do for Brookfield Homes. They do hundreds of millions of dollars for Brookfield Homes, this legal firm. And I said, why the heck is Brookfield not just doing this in-house? Like, why don't they have their own legal team? And he says, oh, they have a small legal team, but the thing is they can't sue their own legal team if they make a mistake. And I was like, all of a sudden, like a little light bulb went off in my head. I'm like a 12-year business owner at this time. And I'm like, oh yeah, when you hire an external firm, you're transferring the risk. You're buying insurance in a project that if something goes wrong, you have a finger to point. You have a document to hold up. You have somebody to say, you screwed up and I want recourse. And so that's why Brookfield Homes is outsourcing their legal team, is they're deferring the risk to somebody else, they're transferring that risk, and they're willing to pay a premium in order to do that, right? Rather than bringing it in-house. Sure, bringing it in-house is cheaper, but then they don't have anybody to blame but themselves when something goes wrong. And that's exactly what you're doing by hiring us, right? Yes, you could bring an in-house developer to do it, but then when the in-house developer screws up, you're like, I guess we fire them and we hire somebody else, maybe, sort of. I don't know. You hire an external firm, you say, well, I'm going to go hire an external firm and I'm going to sue, right? And I want recourse for the failed project, right? And so when there's a thick layer of risk around something, outsourcing makes a lot of sense. Oh, we got double slide there. Okay, so whoops. Okay, so when you outsource, one of the main things that we hear all the time is, oh, I got a proposal from one of your competitors and it's 20 grand cheaper than you guys. It's 40 grand cheaper than you guys. Why are you guys 60 grand cheaper than somebody else? Right? These prices on some of these platforms can vary unbelievably wildly. And we hear it all the time. And so there's a couple different reasons for that, and I'll use a couple of analogies to explain. So the first can be that the front end of what you see might ultimately be the same, but what powers that could be radically different, right? I can build you a platform that looks amazing, but if Apple changes one little thing in their platform, Windows updates from 11 to who knows what, Chrome updates, whatever it ends up being, the platform just crashes. It's just built on toothpicks and straw, and one little gust of wind crashes it all down, versus a platform that looks visually the same and has 100 times more hours put into the backend infrastructure on security, on maintenance, on reliability, on robustness, on all of these features that nobody will ever see. But the core infrastructure behind the scenes is radically different. So that's the first reason. The second reason is the inverse of that, right? Where the individual comes to me and asks for a 1,200 square foot, 2-bed, 2-bath, right? And I could build it out of a shipping container, or I could build it on a beachfront somewhere in Cabo, right? These both satisfy the client's requirements of a 1,200 square foot, 2-bed, 2-bath, right? If that's what their scope says that I have to produce, there's literally $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 difference in the way that I can approach these two things. And so proposals vary very wildly because of the back end technology that is used and the front end visual of how you implement that. And that ultimately comes down to, do you need something cheap and fast? Do you need something scalable and secure? Right? Do you need something bespoke? Do you need a pre-built theme? And so it is really, really important for you to ask your vendor providers why they are making the architecture choices that they are. Why are you using Webflow? Why are you using Squarespace? Why are you using WordPress? Right? Ask them these questions because the 1,200 square foot two bed, two bath can be designed in a bunch of different ways. And it's really important for you to understand the decision-making framework that these vendors are using when they send out their quotes to you. Another reason the price can vary so wildly is the risk difference, right? Again, we carry $2 million worth of liability insurance. If one of our sites gets hacked, if something gets compromised, if user passwords go somewhere, if somebody loses a whole bunch of money in sales, we carry a liability insurance. That's not cheap, right? Sarah Insurance from our EA group isn't on this call, but I would ask them right now, how much does that cost? And I'll tell you, for us, it costs us 10 grand plus a year to carry that kind of insurance. It's not cheap, right? And so part of the premium in the work that we do goes into those costs, right? And that's not something that you're going to necessarily see on a proposal, right? Or in an introductory call with a client, right? Is all of those things. Small asks can also balloon wildly. So if you ask us to build a form that then sends something, let's say you want them to submit a Google review on your website, scan this QR code, go to our website, leave us a review, and then you say, if that person left us a 4 or 5-star review, then ask them to leave you then a Google review. It's a pretty common workflow. Great. And then they say, oh, I also want to ask them to leave that same review on Facebook and Yelp. You've now taken what is like a 10-hour task and made it an 80-hour task. You've said like 2 words, Yelp and Facebook, and you're like, oh, that's trivial, that's easy. But it's not, because now all of a sudden we need to store that review so that we could send it to multiple locations. We now need to log into 3 different platforms in order to host that same review, right? We need to host this platform somewhere. All of a sudden, these little asks can really, really escalate the difficulty and technical requirements of a project. And so we often say that like writing the code, actually building it, is 10% of our job. And the other 90% of it is making sure that this platform still works next week, right? And so this was something that I was alluding to earlier. Every day, literally every day, something is changing in our world. Something is changing. There's a new iPhone or Android phone that is coming out. WordPress, if you're doing a website, is publishing new files, or there's new plugins, right? Chrome, Safari, whatever internet browser you're using on your desktop or your phone has been updated. Windows or the Mac have a new update for you. Google publishes new SEO or whatever technical standards. Your payment gateway changes or they've changed something. Facebook, Twitter, X, or whatever. Constantly, our world is changing. And so what we do as developers is not only build you your application for today, but we build your application so that it works tomorrow and next week and in a month. And we don't always get it right. Sometimes things break, sometimes things fall through, but then you come to us and you say, okay, now fix it. And we say, great. Not only are we going to fix it on your website or platform, we're going to fix it on the 200 other ones that we maintain. And we know how to do that. If you do this work in-house, this is what I mean by that maintenance tax that is constantly going to be consuming your developer's time, is fixing the application for all of these things, for the not Rubik's cubes, for the I can't even think of the machine where the ball rolls and hits the block, which rolls and hits the cup and rings the bell, and then the mouse runs and eats the cheese, whatever, right? Incredible Machine style, right? All of these pieces of technology integrating with each other. That's what your in-house developer is going to be doing. So let's talk about the third option. We've talked about doing it in-house. We've talked about outsourcing it to a firm. When does buying something that already exists make sense? So when the capability is not your primary differentiator, we call it table stakes. That's a really good reason to purchase something. So think about like Dropbox or Google Drive, right? Or OneDrive. Your business is not in the file storage system, but you need to purchase a file storage solution. You're not going to hire somebody to build you a custom file storage system, and you're not going to hire somebody in-house to do it either. You're going to go purchase a SaaS, right? You're going to go purchase a piece of software that does that for you. When the process is well understood and stable, these are really good reasons to purchasing a SaaS. So like payment gateways is another example. We have been working now for 15, 17 years, something like that. We've never once built a payment gateway, a truly custom payment gateway, because there is so much risk and there is so much to understand that it is far easier for us to go purchase Stripe or integrate PayPal or Moneris or whatever your payment gateway of choice happens to be, right? Because those developing platforms are well understood and stable. The other thing with these platforms is integrations are available. It's very easy for us to integrate into PayPal. They make it quite simple for us to do, so we do it. And there's a time value proposition. I can have a payment gateway spun up in half a day if I use PayPal. And if I have to build something custom, it's going to take me 2 months, right? So there's a time value question. So the faster you need a platform, the more willing you should be looking at building out a SaaS or purchasing a SaaS. If you are going to purchase a SaaS, if you're going to purchase something out of the box, you really need to do your due diligence and you need to have an exit plan just in case something happens. So you need to understand who owns your data, right? How is your data stored? How is your data backed up, right? You need to understand if you are buying a piece of software, what is the support agreement? How do you contact support? We call those SLAs, right? What is the uptime? How quickly do they have to get back to you? Right? These are all things and questions that you should be asking yourself. Try to avoid, we see this all the time, what we call glue sprawl, where you have like 4 different systems trying to talk to each other in a convoluted, kludgy way, right? And this is what I talked about with that copying and paste example right at the very outset, which is, yes, it's okay to copy and paste something from a spreadsheet into, let's say, Xero or QuickBooks, fine. But it's not okay to go from a spreadsheet to an invoicing system, from an invoicing system to an inventory management system, and then from the inventory management system to the website so that you can update the quantity that you have and deduct it by 1, right? That's glue sprawl. That's like trying to fit all of these messy pieces together. And that's something that we often see with these SaaSes that advertise integrations. It's all of these things are integrating and talking to each other, but really none of them are. And you end up doing this copying and paste process instead. And so when this starts to happen is when you should start thinking about, okay, let's hire somebody to build this in-house or let's hire somebody to build it externally, because clearly what we need is a custom solution, not a bunch of SaaSes tied together. And then just know what your exit strategy is. Ideally, you have a good SaaS partner and you never need to exit, but no. What are your timelines? What are the price caps in terms of having to leave the platform? Is there documentation if you have to leave the platform? What are their data retention policies? These are just like important questions to ask and think about if you're going to exit a SaaS. One thing that we've found, and I'm throwing a monkey wrench into my 4-pillar decision-making framework, is this idea of hybrid. So one thing that we have found really successful particularly for associations, regulatory organizations, colleges, um, is when they have a or multiple in-house developers, but then they hire us or another firm as a fractional advisory team. And so our responsibility on the project can vary depending on the in-house skill sets that these teams have. But what we basically end up being is like a zero 0.3 FTE individual that works for an organization. Sometimes you'll hear these as fractional CTOs or fractional developers that come into firms that are being advertised all over on LinkedIn. But we've actually found them to be quite successful because then you have somebody in-house that is just as invested that you can spin and turn and look to your left or to your right and have a discussion around. But you also get the outsourced expertise of an organization that has done this hundreds of times, right? That can raise the standards, that can help avoid unforced errors. And so this idea, if you partner with the right organization, this idea of hybrid can be a really positive experience for everybody. There will be technology firms in your regions that will not want to do this, right? That will say, no, we either have to own all of it or none of it, right? We don't want to have to talk to somebody within your team to do it. And I understand why they choose to do it. It's a harder thing for our kinds of organizations to do because the budgets are smaller, the hours are more scattered over the course of a week, right? So it's harder. But if you can find the right person, these hybrid relationships can be really positive. Okay, and so then my fourth pillar is the do nothing pillar. The strategy or process is unclear. The problem statement is fuzzy. You don't have the right decision makers in the room. The ownership of the project is not defined. These are all immediate red flags as to when you should be doing nothing, right? If the data for the project, if the content for the website, if the inventory for the ERP isn't managed appropriately, what we'll call data hygiene, I wouldn't immediately jump into a project yet, right? If alternatives exist, right? If there's a good, safe workaround, a temporary workaround, right? You can reliably choose not to engage in a particular project, right? Whoops, went forward too far. So doing nothing isn't a lack of inertia. It's a structured pause, right? We're sort of like trained as business leaders to like always want to be moving forward, to purchase the software, to build something new, to invest in something, move, go, push. But doing nothing is a strategic decision to rethink and reevaluate, well, what is it doing that we need? Maybe we should build a prototype. Maybe we should map out our processes. Maybe we should just take a small step forward and clean our data and then redefine what we want to do, right? Maybe there's small stop gaps that you can do. We encounter more often than you would think organizations that come to us, they drop 60K and they say, build us this. And we get through 70% of the project. And then they say, oh, we're not ready for you yet. And they put the project on pause for 6 months. And then we're just like twiddling our thumbs. What are we supposed to do now? Right? We have developers that are ready. We're going to charge them project management fees for holding the project still. And that's because they weren't ready to engage in the decision-making process in the platform. So doing nothing is a reasonable approach if it's done with intention. So let's wrap things up. This is like the summarized, wrap it up into a bow of the decision-making framework. Is the core of what we are building part of your differentiation as a business? If it is, bias towards in-house or some sort of hybrid solution. If it's not, you might think about buying something or configuring a SaaS or outsourcing it. What is the rate of change? How fast does this project need to move? What is the rate of change of the industry, of the kind of software that you are building? If it's fast changing, maybe look to build it in-house or again, do it hybrid. If it's stable, e-commerce platforms are a good example. The idea of money and credit cards haven't really changed in 40 years. Then it's stable. Maybe buy it, outsource it. What is your risk tolerance or risk? What is the level of risk service on this, right? If there's high compliance and high security around it, then if you are going to build it, you need a very seasoned in-house person, or you need to trust a local partner with that. What is the exit risk? How portable does the data need to be, right? If you can't get a clean export, you can't get fair renewal terms, you're worried about lock-in where you have to use their process in the future, maybe you want to build something that you own, right? But if you can export something and you're okay with it living on somebody else's servers, right? And you feel like they provide you good support, then maybe buying something or configuring a SaaS is the right decision. And finally, if the process or the return on investment is unclear and you don't have a good framework for exactly what you're building and all of your ducks aren't in a row, then pausing and moving slowly is absolutely the right process and shouldn't be looked upon negatively as a business owner or leader. So that's that. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the opportunity to chat and discuss this with you. I clearly have a little bit of a passion for these kinds of decisions. It's something that I've been doing for quite a while. I've seen both the good and the bad that have come from all of these scenarios and all of these various silos, these decision-making opportunities. And so I'm happy to discuss, answer questions. Please feel free to reach out to me via my email address. You can also find a lot of this information on our website, and I will send this presentation to Lisa, who will distribute this out. So if you want to have the slide deck accessible, you're more than welcome to have access to it.
Great.
So Kyle,
Thanks,
sorry,
Kyle. Yeah, Richard, go ahead, please.
how many employees do you have?
So we're at 17 right now, 15 full-time and 2 part-time. 15 are in the office with us in Edmonton, and then 2 are in Victoria. BC.
Thank you for thank you for your discussion. I think it really points out, all the different options to, outsourcing or doing it in-house. I just want to share a really quick story what happened to our executive association. And this is something that's kind of like a horror story, but I think it makes sense for other associations to hear and understand. About 20 years ago, this is way back, when getting on the web and building websites were still kind of new. We had a member that joined us who's a sort of like a one-man band, but he outsourced a lot of his development, coding and graphic design and things. But he was our web guy. He was our web, category and web designer category. And what happened was that he did a great job. He got a lot of business out of our members. And, his business model was, you get the business and then he works with and he had a lot of, I guess, out support people that were, I guess, like either freelancers or independents. And so it was really good. As I mentioned, he got a lot of business of our members, and he was very pleased. He got a lot of awards in the community as well as in our organization of appreciating all of this. So the short end of it was after garnering a lot of business from us and as well as the community, we didn't realize he had a psychological problem. He had depression, and one day he committed suicide. And the unfortunate thing was he was the only one that had access to all the passwords and all the logins to all the websites that he designed. And all the other people that supported him did not, or they did just to access it, but did not have a way to transfer all those websites to the owner. And that was a very painful story. We had to deal with it for several years when the members just were, anyway, just a quick story.
Totally. And we see this often in our industry too, where a business will hire a freelancer as the solution because the freelancer is cheaper or the freelancer is more accessible, whatever. And then the freelancer decides to go get a job somewhere else or move away or gets curmudgeonly or whatever. And then they no longer own their domain or they no longer have access to their email or they lose some files. What it happens constantly. And so it's really important that if you're going to outsource, that you work with a trusted, reputable firm where if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, well, then our CTO is going to have access to all of your files and all. And if they get hit by a bus, then it's going to go to our CFO or like there's an infrastructure around it, not just one person working out of their parents' basement. We hear this problem often because I don't get letters after my name, right? My father gets to call himself a PN. My wife gets to put a BSCN after her name. Like there's a designation for being trusted and reputable and you're part of a college. I don't, right? I don't get to have an association that validates Kyle is a web developer and he's reputable and he's trustable and he pays a membership fee to a college who then can validate. And if you've got a complaint with Kyle, you can bring it to them and there's recourse. We don't get any of that, right? And so anybody can put up a shingle and call themselves a web developer or call themselves a designer or a DevOps individual. And that's who we end up competing with. And businesses, because they're looking to save a buck, because they don't have the right decision-making framework in place, whatever the reason ends up being, they choose those options. And they can often get burned because of that.
Well, what I wanted to emphasize is that he was a well-accepted member of our executive association, for many years, and he developed a lot of relationships with fellow members, and they all trusted each other. It's just something out of the blue that happened, and
Sure.
everyone was stuck.
So even if they're not, even if they are reputable and trusted, it's one person isn't resilient, right? It's like the backup thing. You should never be backing up your files on the same platform that the platform itself is on, right? I get that for sure. Okay, well, thank you. If there's no more questions, I'll let everybody get out of here and finish up their lunches and get back to work. And if I see any emails, I'm happy to jump on them and answer whatever questions.
Thank you so much, Kyle. We
Awesome.
appreciate having
Thanks,
you
Lisa,
today.
for hosting, for sure.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye all.